Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
The Nike Phantom series is responsible for some of Nike's best and some of Nike's most mediocre football boots, but inside this box is their latest entry into the Phantom series called the GX, which as far as I can tell stands for absolutely nothing. But regardless of that, the boots are really impressive and in my opinion a step in the right direction. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Nike Phantom GX Elite, this being the low cut variation without the lace cover with of course exposed laces and a standard low cut design, retailing for the same $250 as the low cut version of the GT2 Elite that it replaces, with grip being the focus of this new design, specifically Nike's GripKnit technology. And grip it does, both the ball as well as the surface underneath your feet with the new sole plate and stud pattern tooling. It's the same general idea and concept of the Phantom GT series, but done so in a way that I think is much more effective and certainly a lot more unique and noticeable when compared to other football boots out there. I'm going to break down all the technical details in today's video, talk about how they compare to other options out there, including the GT2 that they replace, how they fit and feel on feet, and ultimately whether or not the Phantom GX should be on your radar for your next pair of football boots. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you're interested in a pair for yourself, unfortunately this launch colorway released in very limited quantities and sold out pretty much everywhere, but if you are interested in a pair for yourself, when new colorways come out, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoy the content and perhaps want to see reviews of the rest of the Phantom GX lineup, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, along with hitting that little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022 and 2023 as it quickly approaches. So first things first, the upper, GripKnit. What's it all about? And you can see Nike have gone for this kind of fingerprint pattern within the knit itself, and basically it's a variation of their Flyknit technology, which we're used to seeing in Nike football boots. The difference is the texture of that material on the surface, which unlike the Phantom GT, which offered grip by way of kind of like grittiness, making the surface of the upper kind of on the rougher side with all of those little lines for added texture or chevrons on the GT2. With GripKnit, it's more of a sticky type of texture, and it's really difficult for me to compare it to anything else that we've seen before. It's not quite to the level of the rubber elements you're going to find on the Phantom Edge in terms of having tons and tons of additional grip, but it's also extremely consistent in that all the area here that you see in red and kind of like this purpley color is extremely grippy on the ball in both dry as well as wet conditions. It almost feels like a coated surface, but the grip itself is actually incorporated into the individual yarns to create this GripKnit material, which means that you get the regular softness and flexibility of normal Flyknit. It's very sock-like in terms of how it moves with your foot and how it wraps your foot, making them really, really comfortable, much more so than the Phantom GT, which I am very thankful for. But that additional grip on the ball is super noticeable, but I think more importantly, very manageable. It's not to say that you're gonna put these on and not have a little bit of kind of like a getting used to period, because it's definitely stickier to the ball than what you're gonna find from 95% of football boots out there. The Phantom Edge probably being the only thing that provides a little bit more grip, but the touch is super clean. It has a little bit of a padded feel to it, so it really does feel like a middle ground in terms of cushion on the ball compared to the Mercurial and the Tiempo, which I really like. So definitely a little bit softer and a little bit more padding than what the Phantom GT series had on offer. But that additional grip, I could compare it to like a high-end yoga mat, if you know what I'm talking about. Maybe that's a silly comparison to make, but it really does offer this nice level of grip that not only feels like it's going to be super durable long-term, but again, it's just pleasant on the ball. It's super noticeable when striking the ball. It's really noticeable for the sake of control. You definitely do have to get used to it when it comes to dribbling, but I do think that the overall feel from GripKnit is something that is very positive. With that said, I hate the position, or at the very least the material of the Nike branding. That you can see it's kind of like a fused on top layer of almost like a plastic type material, and it's not very grippy. So when you run the ball along this part of the upper, particularly noticeable when dribbling and just pushing the ball right here, that material is very slippery, where the rest is super grippy. So even though you have this grip material kind of spanning all the important areas of the foot, a large section where this Nike swoosh is simply isn't going to have the same level of grip, which I think is honestly a bit of a fail on Nike's part, but at the end of the day, not necessarily a deal breaker either. Maybe I'm being overly nitpicky, but it's something that I immediately noticed when I first tried the boots. You'll also notice on the low-cut version of the Phantom GX that some of the lacing system is covered by this GripKnit material. It almost basically has a hood that flows over top of an additional lacing position for the sake of more consistent grip in an area where you otherwise wouldn't have it. But what I like about this design in particular is it does allow for a deeper lacing system than what we had on Phantom GT 1 and 2, which I think was one of the major downfalls of that football boot from a fit and comfort perspective. This still maintains kind of an off-centered lacing system, but it is fairly close to the middle. The fact that it runs so much deeper though really allows for a much better and more secure fit, particularly through the forefoot and midfoot, something that I just didn't care for with the Phantom GT. However, what I will say, and you'll see this more during the on-feet portion of the video, because you basically have this kind of free-floating hood in this one little section of the upper, you do get some pretty significant creasing and folding in the upper, which doesn't look the best, but quite honestly, you don't feel it when it's on your feet. And in terms of touch on the ball, I didn't find it to be a noticeable thing in terms of detracting from overall ball feel. Which brings us to the rear, where if you read some of Nike's tech specs, they do talk about this opening being shaped in a very particular way for the sake of movement and comfort, but quite honestly, it just feels like a standard low-cut Nike design with this Flyknit kind of lining the edges. Nothing super notable there. I like the fact that they give you this little extension piece to kind of hang on to when putting the boots on in particular, but at the rear, they have actually done something pretty unique in that it doesn't have a solid plastic heel counter. The back of the heel is completely soft, where on the sides you can see the sole plate tooling does have these little extension pieces in plastic, and there's also some plastic on the sides, but at the very back there is no actual hard structure, just the structure from the material itself, as well as the padding of the heel liner, and that's there for the sake of comfort and just making the boots easier to break in. And honestly, they're just really comfortable for that particular reason. The only downside of this particular design is that if you do get kicked directly in the back of the heel, all you're getting there is the padding from the heel liner for protection. So something to be aware of. I don't think it's going to be that impactful in terms of the safety of the football boots. Getting kicked there, I would say, is relatively uncommon, but it is something to be aware of and not necessarily a new concept. I know Nike is kind of presenting it as something that they've come up with, but we've seen Puma do this in the past for different reasons. We've seen a couple different football boots not have a solid piece at the back, but I will say from a comfort perspective, it is a gigantic improvement in the heel area when compared to the Phantom GT1 and GT2, where I know a lot of people, not necessarily me, did experience issues with heel blisters. That should not be the case with the new Phantom GX. And as far as the heel liner is concerned, really straightforward, soft kind of synthetic suede, almost like a microfiber material, plenty of padding. It just feels super, super soft. And then you can see internally, the liner is like a Phantom GT 1 and 2, in that it's this kind of super smooth, kind of synthetic material. So it doesn't necessarily have that soft sock-like feel on the inside of the football boot, but the material itself, the GripKnit, Flyknit, whatever you want to call it, is pliable and really, really soft, and just makes for a very sock-like sensation despite the inside lining not being made from kind of a soft mesh type material. And then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. Standard mesh liner on the surface, and then it's made from a single layer of yellow foam with this really cool fingerprint pattern kind of etched into the bottom. Which brings us to the base of the boot, where you'll find all new sole plate tooling and a new stud pattern for the Phantom GX, with Nike arguably going in a simple direction compared to what we saw for the last several variations of Phantom GT, in that it's a solid sole plate made entirely of a plastic material that is unspecified by Nike, with this kind of zigzag flex groove system that they're touting is for the sake of better overall traction, having the boot move in the same direction that players move, for the sake of having better traction. And I've always been of the opinion that a more flexible sole plate allows the boot to move more closely with the bend of your foot, which will typically allow for as many studs to be under your feet as possible. So at the end of the day, sole plate stiffness I think is very much a personal preference thing, but what you're definitely going to find with the Phantom GX, certainly more so than the Mercurials, and I would argue even more so than the Nike Tiempos, is that it's very, very flexible through the forefoot. There's not a lot of that spring back effect. It's more so just for the sake of moving very naturally with your foot, which I personally am a big fan of. And then as far as the FG stud pattern is concerned, you can see they've kind of gone away from making it a mock variation of the Mercurial and have more or less made it a hybrid, again, of their two other lines, where it's going to incorporate some of those tri-star shaped studs from the Mercs, but also incorporate some rounded studs from the Tiempos. So for the most part, it still ends up feeling very aggressive in terms of giving you plenty of bite when pushing off, but because you have those conical studs kind of at the base of the forefoot, depending on how you're planted, you still kind of have that freedom to twist and pivot. I don't necessarily think it's anything groundbreaking as far as Nike stud patterns go, but again, it's a nice middle ground compared to their other two lines and does feel like something different that ultimately performs in a very positive way. Which brings us to the weight, something that I wouldn't say was necessarily a highlight of the Phantom GT2, but is the Phantom GX any lighter or perhaps even heavier? Let's find out using a scale, both in the same size, 9.5 US. We'll start off with the outgoing GT2, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 218 grams. It actually changed to 7.7 as I put them on. We'll change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Phantom GX, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.2 ounces, the equivalent of 204 grams. So you're talking about a weight difference of about half an ounce in favor of the GX, so it has shed a little bit of weight and is now in a weight range where you're going to find the vast majority of high-end speed boots. So if you're looking for that lightweight feel, the Phantom GX, I would argue at least, does feel lighter than the GT2. On feet, the Phantom GX feels like a good example of a Nike Flyknit upper. It's soft, it's flexible, it's sock-like in a lot of ways, certainly more so than the Phantom GT that it replaces, and that's mainly due to the fact that there seems to be a little bit more of a cushion to the knit material this time around, where I thought the GT was definitely on the thinner side, more Mercurial-esque in a lot of ways. Also, a lot of people want to compare the Phantom GX to the OG Hypervenom Phantom 1, and I suppose the grip on the upper is somewhat similar in terms of almost having a little bit of that waxy silicone finish, although I definitely think these are a lot stickier on the ball. But in terms of this compared to the Nike skin upper of that Hypervenom Phantom 1, I'd say they're pretty far apart. This is more along the lines of like maybe a Superfly 4 Magista Obra 1 in terms of just being a really pure sock-like Flyknit upper, which I think a lot of people will really like. The boots are super comfortable, and particularly through the heel. I'm not sure if it's down to the shaping. I'm not sure if it's because it doesn't really have a heel counter directly at the back. The boots just feel very comfortable and honestly really secure on feet with the laces tied tight. Again, that deeper lacing system compared to the GT1 and GT2 is very much appreciated. The shape, however, hasn't really changed all that much. It's still decently wide through the heel and midfoot, and then definitely tapers quite a bit through the forefoot and toe box area. So if you like the general shaping of the GT series, it kind of remains in place here with the GX, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. The boot does have some give to it. From a lockdown and responsiveness standpoint, I wouldn't say that this upper is any more structured than the GT series, so they're definitely not going to be as responsive as the Mercurials, but they still feel very secure on feet and definitely don't have a sloppy feel. But in terms of overall width, as long as you're okay with a slightly slimmer shape through the toe box area, I think these are going to be suitable for most people as long as you don't have excessively wide feet. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length seems to be perfect. So if you are looking to order a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size. in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, and of course in my opinion, the Nike Phantom GX is a huge improvement over the Phantom GT1 and GT2 that they replace. So if you were thinking of upgrading, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what Nike have come up with. With that said, if you're not currently wearing a Phantom GT model and are just curious about the Phantom GX in general, there are three main reasons why you would want to wear these boots. Number one is you like something that is super comfortable and easy to break in. Number two is you like the feel of a slightly padded knitted upper. And number three, you like having additional grip on the ball. In terms of those three characteristics, quite honestly, nothing even comes close to these. GripKnit as a new Nike technology is an absolute win in my opinion. You get the additional grip on the ball that is super noticeable when dribbling, controlling the ball, and certainly when shooting, which is particularly my favorite aspect of having additional grip, similar to something that you'd get from an Adidas Predator Edge with all of its rubber elements, but done so in a way that doesn't detract from the sock-like flexibility and just general natural feel of this football boot, both on your feet as well as on the ball. The grip is there without any extra bulk, and that I think is super impressive. Add in the fact that the shape is great, the comfort is excellent, they have much better adjustability than the Phantom GT2, and they haven't actually gone up in price like we're seeing with so many new football boots these days. So in terms of reviving the Nike Phantom line, I think Nike have done so successfully with the GX. And while I don't know that I would necessarily pick them over the Nike Tiempo Legend for myself personally, if it was down to wearing the Phantom GX or really most other synthetic football boots on the market right now, this would be very, very high up on my list. And it's a pair of boots that honestly, I'm excited to spend more time in.